Can Catholics practice yoga? That is what we are going to be discussing in this video. We have the most updated information and have written the latest book on this subject. So in this video, we're going to avoid the extremes and people who say yoga is perfectly fine with no problems. And then on the other hand, all of the postures, exercises, and poses worship Hindu gods. And so even just doing the exercises is wrong because it's intrinsically linked to Hindu worship. As we're going to see, both of those are false. We are going to take a rational middle ground approach to this topic and see what yoga is, its history, its origin, and its goals, and then say, can Catholics enter into that and use this practice? And what about if it's just for exercise? What if we don't do the spiritual aspects of this and we only do it to become fit and we only do it for physical fitness? Is that okay? We're going to answer both of those questions in this video. In order to answer that question, we have to look at what is yoga. And every time somebody asks me, can I do yoga as a Catholic or a Christian? I say, well, what is yoga? And the majority of people immediately say, well, it's just exercise. It's just fitness. To which I reply, no, exercise is exercise. Yoga is much more than just exercise. If you were just exercising and just doing fitness, then it's not a problem because exercise is not against God. But spiritually, yoga is more than just exercise, as we're going to see in a moment. The first mention of the word yoga comes from 2,500 years ago in the Hindu scriptures. And the history of yoga goes back thousands of years, and it all comes from the Hindu scriptures. Gods, for example, like Shakti, Krishna, and Shiva, all delivered yoga to mankind in order for them to have a vehicle to free themselves from the karma and from the confines of this material world and to find divine enlightenment. That was the original goal and the original purpose of yoga. And if you read the Hindu scriptures, the whole goal of yoga is divine enlightenment, to become one with all that is. And that's what yoga means. The word yoga comes from the root word which means union or integration. So the whole point of yoga is to find union between your mind, your body, and your soul. And then once you have union with yourself, the whole goal of yoga is to find union with the divine, with Brahman, or with the universe, depending on how you look at it. So the whole goal is to find union with all that is, and that's what yoga means. Now, there are many different versions and forms of yoga, but one man 2,000 years ago named Patanjali is probably the most authoritative person in the Hindu religion. He was an author, a scholar, and a sage, and he took all the different forms of yoga, the different philosophies, and he put them and synthesized them all into one form of yoga, royal or Raja yoga. His texts, the Yoga Sutras, are the most authoritative and foundational texts in the history of yoga. And here's what he says yoga is. He says that yoga is like a tree with 8 branches, and each branch is part of what makes up yoga. The first 2 branches are practicing virtue and avoiding evil, and then studying. Those are what the first 2 branches are. The third branch, or the third limb, as he calls it, is asana, or what most people would know as the postures. The fourth limb is breathing and breath control. Then there's concentration, withdrawal of your senses, meditation, and eventually the 8th limb, which is samadhi, which is divine enlightenment, freedom from this world, becoming one with Brahman or the universe or one with all that is. So as you see, there are 8 branches or limbs of yoga. This is what yoga is. Now notice that yoga is not just exercise because exercise is only one branch of the 8. It only consists of one branch. And all yogis and scholars say that it was the least important of the other 7. And in fact, the first 2 are just preparatory stages. The third one is just to help your body sit in meditation for hours. But the real work of yoga is the meditation and the concentration and the withdrawal of your senses so that you can meditate for long hours and lose yourself to become one with all that is. So is yoga just exercise? No, of course it's not. As one prominent Hindu scholar said, she said that many people associate yoga with exercise, but she said, it's like saying that the brick is the house. And many people, instead of calling the house, they call the brick the house because they're taking one small part of the house and calling it the whole house. She said that they're confusing the whole with the part. She also makes the comparison with Christians who, at home, in the comfort of their own house, eat bread and drink wine. Are they participating in the Lord's Supper just because they're eating bread and taking a sip of wine? Of course not. That has nothing to do with the Lord's Supper or communion or mass or worship of any kind. You're just eating bread and you're just drinking wine. Likewise, just doing exercises, she says, is not yoga. And just doing exercises is only a small part of yoga. And in fact, the exercises weren't even part of yoga for thousands of years until modern day. The majority of the asanas were just various forms of the seated position for meditation so that you could turn your body into a board, as the Hindu scriptures say, and meditate for long hours. The downward dog, the warrior pose, those never even existed in the history of yoga, and they didn't even evolve with yoga. So the question is, okay, can we do the exercises? If the exercises are not yoga, and they're not necessarily linked to yoga, can we do the exercises? As we've shown, Catholics can't actually do yoga because yoga is a spiritual practice coming from the womb of Hinduism with Hindu philosophies and many other Hindu teachings that are not just exercises. Some of these things include karma, chakras, universal energy or universal oneness, connection with yourself, which is a capital S because it's a divine self because you're becoming one with God and all that is. The third eye, Om and chanting and many, many other things, Kundalini, are added to just exercise because yoga is not just exercise. All of these other things, these spiritual practices, Hindu beliefs are part of yoga, which are contrary and contradictory to Christianity. Even the breathing and the breath control in yoga is different. See, breathing in exercise is good. It's healthy. It helps the respiratory system. But in yoga, they actually believe it comes from the goddess Shakti, and breathing is not just breath, it's energy. They're breathing in the divine source of energy, and they're letting it circulate in their body. And that divine energy allows them to be neutralized in their mind so that they can meditate for long hours. Even BKS Iyengar, who is the modern pioneer of Hatha Yoga, says that this is the purpose of breathing and breath control. Okay. We get it. Yoga is more than just exercise. Catholics can't do yoga, but can they just do the exercises? What if we just do the fitness and there's no spirituality attached and we just do stretches because we want to get in shape? Is that okay? And the answer is no and yes. Mostly yes. And here's why. Because the exercises did not originate with yoga. They actually preceded and predated yoga. The modern yoga that we know today, all the yoga classes that people go to, downward dog, the warrior pose, the tree pose, the snake pose, those did not exist before 1930. These exercises that we know today as yoga, even though they're not yoga, they actually existed first beforehand in other exercise programs like gymnastics, specifically harmonial gymnastics, Danish gymnastics, Swedish gymnastics, and in other things too. Yoga pulled from contortionism. They pulled from acrobatics. They pulled from Indian wrestling, Western bodybuilding, and many of the poses and postures that yoga uses today, they almost virtually unanimously all came from other exercise programs that had been in existence for decades and decades, long before yoga ever appropriated them to its own practice. And here at Catholic Truth, we've already made a whole video on that topic. If you would like to see that, we have a brief history of the exercises. But the long and short of it is that the exercises weren't developed by yoga. They weren't developed by Hinduism. They aren't part of yoga. They aren't intrinsically linked to yoga. They weren't designed to worship Hindu gods. I've heard Catholics say that, and I've heard Christians say that, and that's absolutely 100% false. They haven't done the latest research on this, and they don't know that the history of these exercises predates yoga, and yoga, I don't want to use the word stole, but appropriated and synthesized these exercises into their own practice so that they could have their own spiritual practice. And even in other programs like medical gymnastics, for example, they used postures and stretches that yoga took, and they tried to find a body, mind, and soul connection through exercise. That is not new to yoga. It was already in place before yoga. So can you do the exercises? The answer is yes. You can do the exercises on their own at home because they aren't linked to yoga. Now, if you go to a yoga class, that's a different story. We as Catholics can't necessarily go to a yoga class, but if we want to do the exercises at home, here's what you need to know. Number one, just do the exercises, no spirituality attached. Exercise is not against God, it's just exercise. And number two, don't call it yoga. Don't say, oh, I do yoga, because these exercises are not yoga. They predated yoga. If anything, say you do gymnastics, since most of them came from gymnastics. But to call the exercises yoga is not yoga, because as we've already seen, yoga is so much more. Which is why we cannot, as Catholics, go to yoga classes, because then we are participating in yoga, even if the majority of it is just exercise. It's still done in a non-Catholic setting with people who are generally non-Catholic. And even the Catholics and Christians who do holy yoga, even though there's no such thing because you can't make yoga holy. It's a Hindu practice. It's impossible. There's no such thing as holy yoga. Maybe holy exercise, but not holy yoga. There's a big difference. See, here's the difference. Many of these classes, and I've gotten arguments with people that they say, oh, we just do the exercise. We just do the exercise. And I'll say, well, there are other things mentioned, like the third eye, which has to do with like psychics and chakras and connection with yourself and meditation and all of these other things. Many times these are found in yoga classes and they're not compatible. And Catholics will tell me, oh, well, I don't do the meditation. I just sit there with my eyes closed, or I think about Jesus, or I think about what I'm going to have for lunch. And I say, okay, well, if someone's sitting next to you or behind you and they see a Catholic with their eyes closed doing meditation, are they going to say, oh, they're just meditating on Jesus? No, they are watching you as a Catholic doing yoga meditation, or at least they think you are. So you're giving scandal and subconsciously, silently witnessing to the fact that it's okay for a Catholic to be in there and doing it. Now, other Catholics might be on the fence. Oh, is yoga good or is yoga bad? And they look at you and they, oh, well, she does it. She's here. She's fine. Okay, it must be okay. And they get into the meditation and different things like that. It causes scandal. It leads people astray. And even Christians aren't catechized most times enough to even know what to keep and what not to keep. I've seen so many Christian and even Catholic yoga programs that have New Age and Hindu teachings in them because they don't know the difference. They don't get rid of everything. So classes aren't the place to do these exercises. If you want to just do exercise, you can do that at home. You can even look up the YouTube videos. You can just do the exercises and leave the spirituality out of it. Exercise, stretching, they're not bad. Yoga is problematic, especially if you get into things like Kundalini yoga or focusing on your energy or your chakras, because even exorcists warn that you can find demonic possession. You can become possessed or even demonically attacked through this practice. And I know a Catholic priest who practices Kundalini yoga, and he's a yoga master, and he gave his witness of how he encountered divine enlightenment. And when you read it, it's absolutely frightening. He actually had a demon in him. I mean, read all the saints in history and their encounters with God and the divine, and it didn't sound like his. His said that he felt like fire was burning him from the inside and out. Needles were pricking him from the inside and out. His vision was getting blurred. He couldn't see straight for weeks. He didn't eat for weeks. He sat in a corner and said he was scared out of his mind. And drums were beating in his head loud, and all of these vicious things were happening to him, which petrified him, which made him not even want to leave his room. But then he came to enlightenment, and now he's happy and supposedly thinks that he had an encounter with God. And we can tell you 100% that it is not God. God does not work through foreign or pagan practices like this, and this man is deceived. It's sad to say, but he's deceived. And now he goes around and deceives others. So the bottom line, if you want to do the exercises, go for it. On your own, at home, just do exercise. Don't call it yoga. And there are other things like Pietra Fitness, Pietra Fitness, which is an exercise program like yoga. It uses dancers who are super flexible, and they will teach you how to get fit, and it has nothing to do with spirituality at all. And they even add a little Catholic spirituality into it. That's fine. Holy Fit, WHOLLY, is really old, but it's another exercise program you can use. But we can't do yoga. We can't get into the philosophies and the ideologies that yoga promotes, and they contradict Christ and they contradict our Catholic faith. So please help us spread the word of this video. Share this with others. This is a question that so many Catholics have, and I think it's realistic to say that we can do the exercises, but not yoga itself. So please spread this, pass it on. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and please like this video, share it, and please check out our Patreon page, support our ministry so we can make many, many more informational, educational, and apologetical videos like this to help save souls, to help change lives, and to help bring people back to Jesus Christ. May God bless you.